The first morning after Ji-woon's decision to leave the Mafia world felt unreal. For years, his days had begun with the clinking of glasses, the echo of gunfire, and the tense silence of men waiting for his orders. But today, he woke to something softer. Eliana's voice humming a hymn as sunlight spilled gently across the small apartment they had chosen to start their new life in. He lay still, listening. For the first time in a long time, his heart wasn't racing. The weight on his shoulders felt lighter. He turned his head and saw her at the little stove, wearing a simple white dress with her braids falling loosely down her back. She wasn't aware he was watching, and she sang as she stirred a pot, her voice pure and steady. "Why are you smiling at me like that?" she teased when she finally noticed his eyes on her. Ji-woon chuckled. "Because I can't believe this is real. I keep thinking I'll wake up back in that cold mansion, surrounded by men who don't know how to laugh." She walked over, wiping her hands on a towel, and sat beside him on the bed. "Well, wake up properly then, Ice King. You're not in that mansion anymore. You're in my world now." He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her shoulder. The scent of her cooking mixed with her perfume, wrapping him in warmth. "Your world is so much better than mine ever was." Later that day, Eliana insisted on taking him to the market. Ji-woon, dressed in a plain black hoodie and jeans, felt strangely out of place. He was used to dark limousines and private chefs, not walking between stalls where fishmongers shouted prices and women argued over the best yams. But Eliana held his hand firmly, weaving through the crowd with confidence. "Here," she said, pointing at a pile of fresh vegetables. "We'll make jollof rice today." "Jollof?" he repeated clumsily. She giggled. "You'll see. It's better than anything your chefs made for you." The vendors stared at them curiously, this intimidating Korean man with scars hidden beneath his sleeves, following a glowing black woman who scolded him like a child. At one point, Eliana handed him a basket. "Hold this." Ji-woon frowned. "Why me? Isn't that your job?" She raised an eyebrow. "You left the Mafia to be my husband, not my boss. So hold it." The Ice King, who once made grown men tremble with a glance, now stood in a bustling Korean market carrying a basket of vegetables while his woman compared tomato prices. For the first time, he laughed at himself. That evening, the kitchen became their battlefield. Eliana instructed him on how to chop onions. Ji-woon tried, but his cuts were uneven, and soon tears filled his eyes. Not from sadness but from the sting of onion juice. "Eliana," he groaned, "are you sure this is safe? I think the onion is attacking me." She burst into laughter, clutching her stomach. "Oh, Ice King, scared of an onion? Where's all your Mafia courage now? I can fight 20 men with guns," he muttered, glaring at the onion. "But this is cruel." She moved behind him, guiding his hands gently. Her fingers intertwined with his as she showed him the right way to hold the knife. "Slow, steady. Cooking is about love, not speed." Ji-woon swallowed hard. Her warmth against his back made him forget about the onions. By the time they sat down to eat, the rice was slightly burnt, the chicken a little too salty. But Eliana clapped her hands in delight. "Perfect. Our first meal together. Not because it's flawless, but because we made it." Ji-woon stared at her, the candlelight reflecting in his eyes. "I've dined in the most luxurious places in Seoul, but nothing ever tasted like this." Eliana smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Because love was missing in those meals. That night, lying beside her, Ji-woon spoke in a low voice. "Eliana, do you think people can truly change? That someone like me, who's spilled blood, who's done terrible things, can deserve peace?" She turned to face him, her eyes tender but firm. "Ji-woon, God's love isn't about what you've done. It's about what you choose now. You're choosing love, peace, family. That's what matters." Her words sank deep into him, softening wounds he thought would never heal. He kissed her forehead gently. "You're my peace, Eliana, my second chance." She nestled closer. "And you're my proof that love can reach even the coldest heart." But outside their little apartment, not everyone celebrated this new dawn. In a dimly lit room across town, former Mafia associates gathered. Ji-woon has gone soft. One spat. He abandoned the empire for a woman. The Ice King is no more. Another leaned forward, his eyes sharp. A man like him doesn't retire. If he won't return to the throne, he'll have to be forced back, or buried. The room fell silent. Shadows lengthened. The world Ji-woon tried to leave behind wasn't ready to let him go. Yet, in that small apartment filled with laughter, Ji-woon and Eliana didn't know of the storm approaching. For now, they only had each other. The clumsy attempts at cooking, the sweet hymns in the morning, the quiet prayers at night. And for Ji-woon, that was enough. For the first time in his life, he felt truly alive. Sunday morning came with a quiet nervousness. Ji-woon stood before the mirror, tugging at the collar of his plain white shirt. He looked unfamiliar to himself. No black silk, no gold chains, no heavy rings. Just a simple man in clean clothes. Yet, his reflection still carried the shadow of his past. Behind him, Eliana adjusted her own dress, a soft sky blue one that flowed gracefully to her ankles. She slipped on her small golden earrings and smiled at him through the mirror. "You look good," she said. "I feel exposed," Ji-woon muttered, fidgeting with the buttons. "That's because you're used to hiding behind power," Eliana teased gently, walking over to fix his collar with her delicate hands. "But today you're walking into a different kind of power, the power of love and forgiveness." He stared at her, still uneasy. "What if they reject me? What if your pastor tells you I'm not worthy to be by your side?" Eliana cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. "Ji-woon, I chose you. That's enough. If anyone questions it, I'll answer them. You don't have to prove yourself in one day." Her words calmed him slightly, though his chest still felt heavy. The church was alive with voices when they arrived. It wasn't the grand cathedral Ji-woon had expected. It was a modest building, painted cream with a cross on the roof and colorful glass windows that sparkled in the sunlight. The moment they stepped inside, warm hymns filled the air. But the warm air turned cold when the congregation noticed him. Whispers rippled through the room. Heads turned. Some stared outright, their eyes wide with curiosity or suspicion. "Isn't that? I heard about him. Why would she bring him here?" Ji-woon's jaw tightened. His instinct told him to glare back, to command silence as he always did. But Eliana squeezed his hand, grounding him. "Ignore them," she whispered. "Just walk with me." They sat together on one of the middle pews. Ji-woon's tall frame looked out of place among the simple wooden benches, but Eliana leaned against him confidently, humming along with the choir. Pastor Choi, an elderly man with kind but sharp eyes, stepped to the pulpit. His gaze landed on Ji-woon and lingered there. He didn't say anything at first, but his pause was noticeable. Then, with a deep voice, he began the sermon. After the service, Eliana tugged Ji-woon's hand. "Come, I want you to meet my family here." Ji-woon wanted to resist, but her determination left no room for escape. They were soon surrounded. "Is this him?" a woman asked in a hushed tone, as though Ji-woon couldn't hear. "Yes," Eliana replied firmly. "This is Ji-woon, my fiancé." Gasps followed. Some smiled politely, others looked troubled. One elderly woman crossed her arms. "Child, you're playing with fire. Don't you know his history?" Eliana's smile never wavered. "Yes, I know. But I also know who he is becoming." Ji-woon felt his throat tighten. No one had ever defended him so openly before. Pastor Choi finally approached. Ji-woon straightened, feeling as though he was about to face judgment itself. "Mr. Han Ji-woon," Pastor Choi began slowly, "I have heard many things about you. None of them are holy." The congregation murmured in agreement. Ji-woon's chest burned with shame. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Eliana spoke instead. "Pastor, with respect, I didn't bring Ji-woon here for you to remind him of his sins. I brought him here because he wants to change. Because love has already started changing him." The pastor studied her for a long moment, then turned back to Ji-woon. "Is this true?" Ji-woon swallowed hard. For once in his life, he wasn't commanding men. He wasn't making threats. He was simply a man, trembling before truth. Yes, I have done terrible things. But I don't want that life anymore. I want to be the man she believes I can be. I want to find peace. The room went quiet. Even the whispers stopped. Pastor Choi's face softened slightly. It is not easy to leave darkness. But if your heart is sincere, God can make even the blackest night turn to dawn. Relief washed through Ji-woon. Eliana squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with tears. Afterwards, they joined the church family for a simple meal outside. Tables were laid out with rice, soup, and fruits. Ji-woon sat stiffly at first, and used to eating among strangers. But Eliana nudged him. Relax, try the kimchi, and don't frown too much, you'll scare the children. Sure enough, a little boy approached timidly, holding a piece of bread. Are you a bad man? The boy asked innocently. Ji-woon froze, unsure how to answer. But Eliana knelt down beside the boy, smiling. He was a bad man, but now he's learning to be good. Because love makes people better. The boy nodded seriously and handed the bread to Ji-woon. Then you can share with me. Something in Ji-woon's heart broke open. He took the bread gently, whispering, "Thank you." Later, as the sun set and the congregation dispersed, Ji-woon and Eliana walked home hand in hand. See, Eliana teased. No one bit you. They stared as if I were a monster. Ji-woon muttered. Maybe, but you stayed. You didn't run. That's more courage than you think. He stopped walking, pulling her close. His voice was low, almost vulnerable. Eliana, I faced bullets and knives without blinking. But today, I was afraid. She smiled softly. That's because love makes you vulnerable. And that's not weakness, Ji-woon. That's strength. He kissed her forehead, closing his eyes. For the first time, he realized he wasn't just surviving, he was learning how to live. But as they walked away, a pair of cold eyes watched from a black car parked near the church. A voice on the phone whispered, "He's truly abandoned the empire. He's weak now. We'll strike soon." The storm was still building. Yet, for Eliana and Ji-woon, this day was a victory. The day the Ice King stepped into the light. Days passed quietly after Ji-woon's first Sunday at church. The whispers hadn't completely stopped, but something had shifted. People still looked at him with suspicion, but they also saw the way he carried Eliana's Bible for her. The way he bowed his head respectfully when prayers began. The way he stood silently and waited while she greeted every single church member with a hug. For Ji-woon, each day was a new lesson. He learned how to shop without bodyguards, how to cook without a chef, how to smile without alcohol to loosen his lips. And each day, he realized something deeper. Eliana wasn't just the woman he loved. She was his compass, pointing him toward a life he never thought possible. But beneath all the laughter and learning, a thought pressed heavily on his heart. If he wanted to keep her forever, he needed to take the next step. Not as the Ice King, not as the man with blood on his hands, but as Ji-woon, a man reborn. One chilly evening, he asked Eliana to meet him at the small chapel near the edge of the city, the same one they had stumbled into the night he first confessed his heart. Eliana arrived wrapped in a long cream-colored coat, her braids tied up in a bun. She looked radiant. As always, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. "Why here?" she asked, stepping inside and glancing around at the empty pews. Ji-woon stood near the altar, his hands trembling slightly inside his pockets. The chapel was dimly lit, candles flickering against the stained glass windows. He had spent hours preparing it in secret, placing flowers along the aisle, setting up a small wooden table with 2 simple cups and bread, like a symbol of communion. When she saw it, her eyes widened. "Ji-woon, what is this?" He cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice. "This place, it's where everything started for me. Where I told you I didn't deserve you. Where you told me love could change me. I wanted to bring you back here, because this is where I realized I wanted you. In my life forever." Eliana's lips parted, her breath catching as she slowly walked toward him. Ji-woon dropped to one knee. For a man who once commanded armies of gangsters, who had stared death in the eye countless times, his hands had never shaken this much. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a ring, Nothing flashy. Nothing dripping in diamonds. Just a simple band with a single stone that glowed softly in the candlelight. Eliana, he began, his voice rough with emotion. I used to think power was everything. I thought if I ruled the city, no one could touch me. But then I met you. And you showed me that all the power in the world means nothing if I don't have peace. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she clasped her hands to her chest. I've hurt people. I've lived in shadows. And I know I can never erase that past. He continued, his voice cracking. But when I wake up beside you, when I hear you laugh, when you pray for me with your whole heart, I believe I can build a new future, a better one, not as a king of the streets, but as a man who belongs to you. His hand trembled as he lifted the ring. I don't want a throne. I don't want an empire. I just want a home with you. Eliana, will you marry me? For a heartbeat, silence filled the chapel. Only the candles flickered. Only the wind brushed against the stained glass. Then Eliana covered her mouth, a sob escaping her lips. Ji-woon! She shook her head in disbelief, tears rolling down her cheeks. You're really doing this? Yes. His eyes were wet too, though he tried to smile. But if you say no, I might die faster than any bullet could kill me. Eliana laughed through her tears, kneeling down to meet him. She cupped his face with both hands, her forehead pressing against his. You foolish man, she whispered. You think I could ever say no? Ji-woon, I've been waiting for you to ask. Yes, she said louder, her voice breaking with joy. Yes, I will marry you. Ji-woon slid the ring onto her finger, his own tears spilling freely now. She didn't care about the stone, the box, or the gesture itself. What mattered was the man before her. The once ruthless Ice King, trembling like a boy because he loved her so much. They stayed there, kneeling on the cold chapel floor, holding each other tightly. Ji-woon buried his face in her neck, inhaling the scent of her skin. You saved me, he whispered. You've given me a life I never thought I deserved. And you've given me proof, she replied softly, stroking his hair, that even the hardest heart can be softened by love. Later, they lit more candles and shared bread and water from the little table he had prepared. It wasn't wine and luxury, but something humbler, almost sacred. Eliana laughed at his clumsy attempt to make the moment symbolic. You're learning too much from me, she teased. Maybe, Ji-woon said, smiling. But if learning from you makes me a better man, then I'll never stop. They sat together in silence afterward, the glow of candlelight wrapping around them like a blessing. But outside, far from the warmth of the chapel, the storm continued to gather. In a high-rise office across the city, a man watched a screen showing grainy footage of Ji-woon kneeling before Eliana in the chapel. His lips curled into a cruel smile. So, the Ice King wants to play house, he muttered. He thinks he can leave this world so easily? His fingers tapped the desk slowly, deliberately. Then we'll remind him that no one escapes the shadows, not even for love. The wedding proposal that felt like heaven inside the chapel had already placed a target on both their backs. That night, as Ji-woon and Eliana walked home hand in hand, she admired her ring under the streetlights, her smile never fading. Ji-woon watched her, his chest tightening with fierce love. He didn't care about the enemies plotting in the dark. He didn't care about his past clawing to drag him back. As long as he had Eliana by his side, he knew he could face anything. The weeks after Ji-woon's proposal were a whirlwind of joy. Eliana called her family in Africa, and their excitement filled the tiny apartment like thunder and laughter. We are coming to Korea, her mother shouted over the crackling phone line. We must see this man with our own eyes before we give you away. Eliana laughed nervously, sneaking a glance at Ji-woon, who froze at the thought of meeting her family. They will love you, she whispered, patting his hand. I faced armed men and survived, Ji-woon muttered. But African mothers? I might not come out alive. Eliana burst into laughter, her cheeks glowing. The wedding preparations became a blend of two worlds. Eliana wanted to keep her culture alive, while Ji-woon's family name demanded some Korean traditions. She refused to let one overshadow the other. One afternoon, Ji-woon entered the apartment to find Eliana and two of her church sisters sewing brightly colored fabrics, singing in her language as they worked. She waved a piece of cloth at him. "This will be your agbada," she announced proudly. "My what?" "Agbada," she repeated, her eyes sparkling. "A grand robe. You will wear it on our wedding day. Don't worry, you'll look like a king." Ji-woon groaned, though secretly, the thought of honoring her culture warmed him. When her family finally arrived at Incheon Airport, the terminal filled with their presence. Eliana's aunt, the one who acted as her mother, a TL woman with a firm but kind face, spotted them first. She rushed forward, embracing her daughter with tears streaming down her cheeks. Then her eyes shifted to Ji-woon. She scanned him from head to toe, her expression unreadable. Ji-woon bowed respectfully, his heart pounding. "Ma'am," he said softly. Her silence stretched for a moment before she finally smiled faintly. You look like trouble. But my daughter's eyes say you are peace. We will see." Eliana's cousins were less subtle. One of them leaned toward her and whispered, "This is the man. Are you sure he is not kidnapping you?" "Leave him alone," Eliana scolded. But Ji-woon simply nodded, understanding that earning their trust would take time. The day of the wedding arrived. The church was transformed with ribbons of gold and white, and outside, the courtyard exploded with music and color. Eliana's relatives wore dazzling African prints, dancing and singing as drums echoed through the air. Korean guests looked on in amazement, some clapping shyly, others joining the dance with awkward but joyful steps. Ji-woon stood near the altar, dressed in his tailored agbada, the bold colors making him look both regal and strangely humble. His men, once feared Mafia enforcers, stood at the edges, now acting as ushers, trying their best to look respectable. When Eliana entered, the room fell silent. She wore a flowing gown that combined African beadwork with Korean embroidery, her veil soft as clouds. As she walked down the aisle, Ji-woon's breath caught. She looked like a queen, but her eyes still held the warmth of the girl who had once scolded him for burning onions. "You may be the Ice King," one of his men whispered under his breath, "but she is the fire that melts you." The ceremony began with prayers and vows. Eliana's voice was steady as she promised to love him, to walk with him in faith and peace. When it was Ji-woon's turn, his voice broke. "I don't deserve her," he said honestly, looking at the pastor, at the congregation, then back at Eliana. "But every day, I will try to become the man she believes I can be. I vow to protect her, to cherish her, and to leave behind every shadow for the light we will build together." The church erupted in applause. Tears streamed down Eliana's cheeks. Even her stern mother wiped her eyes discreetly. Then came the reception outside, the air filled with food, laughter, and dancing. Eliana's family insisted on teaching the Korean guests how to move to the rhythm of the drums. Ji-woon found himself dragged into the circle. He tried to follow the steps, stiff and awkward, while Eliana laughed so hard she almost fell over. "Stop laughing at me," he protested, breathless. "I can't help it," she giggled. "You look like a soldier marching, not dancing." But when she pulled him close, guiding his steps with patience, Ji-woon relaxed, his movements softening. The crowd cheered as the feared Ice King stumbled through an African dance, smiling wider than anyone had ever seen. Just when it seemed the day couldn't get any more perfect, the storm struck. As the sun dipped low and music filled the night, a group of masked men slipped into the courtyard. At first, people thought they were part of the entertainment. But then the glint of weapons caught the light. "Down!" one of Ji-woon's men shouted. Chaos erupted. Guests screamed, children cried, and Eliana's brothers rushed to shield their mother. Ji-woon's instincts roared back to life. In one swift motion, he pulled Eliana behind him, his eyes narrowing into the deadly glare that had once made men tremble. His voice was calm, cold, commanding. "Get them out," he ordered his men. Gunfire cracked in the distance as the attackers clashed with Ji-woon's loyal guards. Tables overturned, food scattered, and the joyful drums fell silent. Eliana clutched his arm. "Ji-woon, what's happening?" He glanced at her, his face tight with anger and fear. An enemy. Someone who doesn't want me to leave the past behind. But our wedding. Nothing will take this day from us, he growled, his protective fury blazing. Not even death. Within minutes, the masked men retreated, chased off by Ji-woon's fighters. No guests were harmed, but the message was clear. Someone powerful still wanted him dead. As silence returned, the shaken crowd murmured in confusion. Some looked at Ji-woon with fresh fear, others with admiration. Eliana's mother stepped forward, her voice sharp. You said you left that life behind, but trouble still follows you. Can you truly protect my daughter? Ji-woon bowed deeply, his pride stripped away. Yes, Mama. I will protect her with my life. Today proved that I can never be careless again. I promise you, no one will take her from me. The woman studied him for a long, tense moment, then finally nodded. We shall see. But for now, finish your wedding. Fear should not steal our joy. And so, shaken but unbroken, the celebration continued. People returned to dancing, though glancing nervously over their shoulders. Ji-woon and Eliana held each other close, moving slowly under the stars. Storms will come, Eliana whispered, but we'll survive them. Together. Ji-woon pressed his forehead against hers. Always. The wedding storm had passed, but darker clouds loomed on the horizon. The storm of the wedding night still lingered in everyone's memory, but the morning after, Ji-woon and Eliana woke up in their new home. A grand mansion that once echoed with silence but now hummed with warmth. Ji-woon had insisted on moving Eliana into his family estate, though most of the staff had been dismissed. I don't want strangers in our space, he explained. Just us, at least for now. Eliana stepped barefoot through the wide halls, her fingers grazing the cold marble. Felt too large, too empty, too foreign. It doesn't feel like home, she murmured. Ji-woon looked at her, a crease forming on his forehead. Then teach me how to make it feel like home. Eliana did exactly that. The next week, she transformed the sterile mansion with bright fabrics, African wall hangings, and handmade clay pots. She opened the windows to let in air and sunlight. She filled the kitchen with spices her family had carried from Africa. Ji-woon nearly fainted when she pulled out a giant sack of dried fish. What is that? She grinned. This, my husband, is gold. We will cook with it today. His stomach turned at the smell, but Eliana refused to let him escape. You promised to learn. Sit. Chop those onions. Ji-woon grumbled, muttering about how he was once the most feared man in Seoul, and now reduced to chopping onions under his wife's command. But when Eliana kissed his cheek and whispered, You're the man I love, not the man the world fears, his pride melted into laughter. The first meal they cooked together was a fusion disaster. Eliana made a spicy African stew, rich with pepper and fish, while Ji-woon insisted on adding a Korean twist with kimchi. The flavors clashed so fiercely that even their cat, a stray Eliana had rescued from the street, turned its nose away. Eliana laughed so hard tears rolled down her cheeks. Ji-woon, this is inedible. Are you saying the great Ice King can't cook? He retorted, pretending to be offended. I'm saying the great Ice King should never touch the spice pot again, she teased. Still, they sat together, forcing spoonfuls into their mouths, laughing until their sides hurt. It wasn't the taste that mattered, it was the togetherness. Over time, Eliana's influence softened every corner of Ji-woon's world. He stopped holding late-night meetings with his former associates and started spending evenings with her on the balcony, sipping tea and watching the stars. She taught him songs in her language, and though his pronunciation made her laugh, his effort touched her heart. One night, she leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you ever regret marrying me? His arm tightened around her. Regret? Eliana, before you, my life was cold stone. You gave me warmth. Even if the world burns tomorrow, I will never regret choosing you. Her heart swelled, but deep inside, she knew his enemies were still watching. The shadow showed itself sooner than expected. One evening, while Eliana was busy planting herbs in the backyard, Ji-woon received a letter delivered by hand. The envelope bore no name, only a black seal. Inside, A single sentence was scrawled. The sins of the Ice King will find him. Ji-woon burned the letter before Eliana could see it, but the weight of those words pressed on him all night. Despite the hidden threats, their days blossomed with sweetness. Eliana insisted they hold weekly dinners where both her family and Ji-woon's allies were welcome. At first, the mix was awkward. Her brothers glaring at tattooed men who once carried guns. Ji-woon's men shifting uncomfortably in the presence of strong African aunties who scolded them for not eating enough. But slowly, the ice thawed. Her mother taught the ex-mafia men how to eat with their hands properly. One even tried fufu for the first time, nearly choking but laughing afterward. By the end of the night, laughter drowned out suspicion. For the first time, Ji-woon felt a glimpse of a community, something he had never truly had. One unforgettable evening, Eliana decided to surprise him with a cultural night. She dressed in full African attire, her head wrapped in bright fabric, her body adorned with beads. When Ji-woon saw her, he froze, his mouth falling open. You look like royalty," he whispered. "I am," she said playfully, lifting her chin. "You're queen." Then she dragged him into the living room where drums played through the speakers. She taught him traditional dance steps. He stumbled, groaned, and cursed under his breath, but she wouldn't let him give up. At last, he managed a clumsy rhythm. The way Eliana's eyes lit up made him feel like he had conquered a greater battle than any mafia war. But peace was fragile. One night, Eliana woke up to find Ji-woon sitting on the edge of their bed, staring into the dark, his gun in hand. "Ji-woon," she whispered, touching his shoulder. He didn't look at her. "I heard footsteps outside. Someone is watching us." Her heart pounded, fear crawling up her spine. What if they try to hurt us? He finally turned, his face hard but his eyes filled with pain. "Then I'll die before I let them touch you." Tears welled in Eliana's eyes, but she forced a smile. "We can't live in fear forever. Let's trust in God, Ji-woon. Let's trust in love." He sighed, lowering the gun. "You're stronger than me, Eliana." "No," she whispered, holding his face. "We're strong together." As weeks passed, their love deepened. They found joy in the smallest things. Burning bread together, painting over the mansion's walls with laughter, even arguing playfully about whose culture had better food. But beneath the laughter, both knew their peace was fragile. Enemies lurked in the shadows, and while Eliana brought warmth into his world, Ji-woon feared that his darkness might one day swallow her light. Still, each night, as they held each other close, Eliana whispered the same words before they slept. "We will not break. We will bloom." And Ji-woon, once the Ice King, believed her. The nights had grown quieter in the mansion, or so it seemed. Ji-woon told himself that perhaps the threats had faded, that maybe his enemies had moved on. He wanted to believe it for Eliana's sake. She deserved peace, not shadows whispering outside their home. But peace was an illusion. One chilly evening, Eliana was walking home from choir practice at the church. She hummed softly, her steps light on the pavement, clutching a small basket of leftovers she had insisted on bringing for Ji-woon. The streets seemed emptier than usual. A strange wind rustled through the alley, and she pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Then she heard it, footsteps, heavy, following. "Eliana!" A voice drawled behind her. She froze, her heart thundering. Turning slowly, she saw two masked men step out of the shadows, their eyes glinting through the dark. Who are you?" she stammered. They didn't answer. One grabbed her arm, the basket falling from her hand, food spilling onto the ground. She screamed, struggling, but a rough palm covered her mouth. A black van screeched to a stop beside them, doors flung open. In less than a minute, Eliana was gone. At the mansion, Ji-woon was pacing. It was past 9 p.m., and she should have been back long ago. He had tried calling her, but the line went dead. His gut twisted with dread. "Something's wrong," he muttered, clenching his fists. Moments later, a call came through. He snatched his phone, breathless. "Eliana," but it wasn't her voice. "Ah, nephew," the voice drawled, dripping with mockery. "Still soft, I see. Still foolish. You left the throne empty, so I've come to claim it. And I have something of yours? Or should I say someone? Jiwoon's blood ran cold. Who is this? A cruel laugh echoed. Han Taejin, your father's brother. The throne was mine before you were even born. And now I will take it back, with or without your blessing. Where is she? Jiwoon growled, his voice low and dangerous. In my care, Taejin replied smoothly. If you want her back, come alone. No weapons, no tricks, or the sweet church girl dies screaming. The line went dead. Jiwoon's body shook, rage boiling inside him. He slammed his fist against the wall, leaving a crack in the marble. His men rushed in. Boss, what's wrong? He glared at them, his eyes blazing with fury and fear. They've taken her. Taejin has Eliana. The men exchanged nervous glances. They had heard stories of Taejin, the cruel strategist who once challenged Jiwoon's father for control of the syndicate before vanishing into the underworld. Boss, we'll come with you, one said. No, Jiwoon's voice was like ice. He said alone. If I don't go, she dies. Then it's a trap. I don't care. Jiwoon's chest heaved. I'll walk into hell itself for her. Meanwhile, Eliana was dragged into a dark warehouse on the edge of Seoul. The air reeked of gasoline and rust. Chains clinked as she was tied to a chair. When the hood was ripped off her head, she blinked through tears to see a tall man standing before her. Han Taejin. He was older than Jiwoon, his hair streaked with silver, his face sharp like a blade. His eyes, however, were cruelly familiar. The same cold fire that once burned in Jiwoon's, but darker, more twisted. So this is the woman who melted the Ice King. Taejin sneered, circling her like a predator. I expected a more. A church girl? Really, Jiwoon has fallen far. Eliana lifted her chin despite her fear. You'll never understand. Love is stronger than your greed. He chuckled darkly. Love doesn't win wars, child. Power does. And Jiwoon will crawl to me, begging, just to see you alive. When he does, I'll end him. Then the throne will be mine. Jiwoon arrived hours later, dressed in black, his eyes burning with vengeance. He carried no weapons, only his determination. Inside the warehouse, he saw her, Eliana, tied to the chair, her face pale but her eyes bright with courage. Jiwoon! She cried, her voice trembling with relief. Don't be afraid, he said softly, stepping forward. I'm here. Taejin stepped out of the shadows, clapping mockingly. Nephew, how noble of you to come unarmed. But then again, you always were weak when it came to matters of the heart. Jiwoon's jaw clenched. Let her go, Taejin. This is between you and me. Ah, but she is the perfect bait, Taejin sneered. You gave up the empire for her. Do you know how laughable that is? Our family was built on blood and power, and you traded it for a woman who sings hymns. Because she gave me something you'll never have, Jiwoon said, his voice shaking with conviction. Peace, love, a reason to live. Taejin's expression hardened. Then watch her die, and let's see if your peace survives. He raised his hand, signaling one of his men to draw a knife toward Eliana's throat. Jiwoon's heart stopped. But Eliana, trembling though she was, lifted her voice. Jiwoon, don't give up who you are now. Don't fight for hate. Fight for love. Her words cut deeper than any blade. Jiwoon's chest heaved, his vision blurring. Memories of Sumin's last words echoed in his head. Leave this life. Don't let her cry anymore. Something inside him snapped. Not into the old Jiwoon, but into a new one. He lunged forward, fists flying, taking down Taejin's guards with feral speed. Though unarmed, his rage and love made him unstoppable. Chains clattered, bones cracked, shouts filled the warehouse. Taejin himself drew a gun, aiming at Jiwoon. Die with your weakness, he roared. But Jiwoon moved faster than ever. He twisted Taejin's arm, disarming him, and pressed the gun against his uncle's chest. The warehouse fell silent. Do it! Taejin spat, his voice trembling. Kill me. Prove you're still one of us. Jiwoon's finger tightened on the trigger, then stopped. His hand shook violently, No, he whispered. Killing you makes me the monster you are. I'm done with blood. He threw the gun aside and turned to Eliana, rushing to untie her. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing against his chest. You came, she whispered, clinging to him. Always, he breathed, kissing her hair. Behind them, Taejin glared, humiliated and furious, but alive. Ji-woon had chosen mercy over murder. That night, as Ji-woon carried Eliana out of the warehouse, he realized something. This was no longer about mafia, power, or thrones. It was about love, the kind worth fighting for, the kind worth changing for. For the first time in his life, the Ice King chose light over darkness. But the war was not over. Taejin had been spared, and a spared enemy never forgets. The night air outside the warehouse was cold and heavy, but Eliana barely felt it. Her body shook as Ji-woon carried her, his arms strong yet trembling. She pressed her ear against his chest, listening to the rapid thud of his heart. You came, she whispered again, tears wetting his shirt. Ji-woon tightened his grip around her. There's nowhere in this world you could be that I wouldn't come for you. Behind them, Taejin's furious shouts echoed in the warehouse, but Ji-woon didn't look back. For once, the Ice King walked away, not because he was defeated, but because he had chosen a different crown. When they reached the mansion, Ji-woon's men swarmed, horrified at Eliana's bruised face and trembling form. Boss, we should go back. End this tonight, one shouted. No, Ji-woon said firmly, his voice carrying a finality that silenced them. It ends here, with me. They stared at him, stunned. Their leader, the man who once ruled with an iron fist, was declaring the war over without blood. But Ji-woon didn't care what they thought. He only cared about the fragile woman clinging to his hand. That night, Eliana refused to sleep alone. She curled up against him in bed, her fingers gripping his shirt as if letting go would mean losing him. Ji-woon, she whispered in the dark. Promise me something. He turned, brushing her hair back gently. Anything. Don't let this life pull you back. Don't let anger and revenge take you from me. Promise me you'll always choose love. His throat tightened. He remembered the faces of all he had lost, the empires built on pain, the shadows that still lingered. For so long, he believed violence was the only answer. But Eliana, she had shown him another way. I promise, he whispered, his lips brushing her forehead. From now on, my only kingdom is you. She smiled through her tears and drifted into sleep, safe in the arms of the man who had once been untouchable yet was now completely hers. Days turned into weeks. The city still whispered about the fall of the Ice King. Rumors spread. Some said he was dead. Others claimed he had fled. But Ji-woon didn't care. He busied himself with learning to live like an ordinary man. He and Eliana planted a garden together, something Ji-woon's cold hands had never done before. He built her a small prayer corner in the mansion, where she placed her Bible, candles, and hymnal. Slowly, the house filled with laughter instead of silence, with warmth instead of shadows. But the fear still lingered in Eliana's heart. She knew Taejin had not given up. The enemy Ji-woon had spared would not stay quiet forever. One Sunday morning, Eliana convinced Ji-woon to join her fully at church, not just sitting quietly in the back as he often did, but standing with her in the front as her husband. The whispers started the moment they entered. Isn't that the Mafia boss? How can he stand here? She must have bewitched him. Ji-woon's shoulders stiffened, his instincts screaming at him to turn back. But Eliana squeezed his hand and whispered, Look only at God. Together they walked to the altar. Pastor Choi, who had once doubted Ji-woon, stared at him long and hard before speaking. Why are you here, Ji-woon? The church fell silent. Ji-woon's voice shook, but he spoke clearly. Because I am a broken man who found love when I least deserved it. Because I don't want to live in darkness anymore. Because she believed in me when no one else did. And I want to believe too. Gasps filled the room. Some looked angry, others curious. But Eliana's eyes shone with tears, and in that moment, that was all that mattered. Pastor Choi's expression softened. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Ji-woon's shoulder. Then you are welcome here, not as the Ice King, but as a man learning to walk in light. That night, as they walked home hand in hand, Ji-woon stopped in front of the little chapel where he had once proposed. He pulled Eliana close, his eyes glistening under the streetlight. "Eliana," he whispered, "do you ever wonder if we're dreaming?" She smiled gently. "If this is a dream, then I never want to wake up." He kissed her forehead, but his chest tightened. He knew Taejin was still out there, waiting, plotting. He knew their peace was fragile. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid. Because love had made him strong in a way guns and power never could. The storm came sooner than expected. One evening, Ji-woon returned home to find the garden trampled, the doors ajar. Panic surged through him. He ran inside, shouting, "Eliana!" Her voice answered weakly from the prayer room. He found her kneeling, clutching the Bible to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "They came," she whispered. "Your uncle's men. They said he will never stop until you bow to him." Ji-woon sank to his knees, wrapping her in his arms. His chest burned with fury, but Eliana's trembling voice anchored him. "You promised me," she said, gripping his shirt. "Don't break it now. Don't go back." He closed his eyes, holding her tight. "I won't. I swear to you I won't." A week later, Ji-woon made his final decision. He invited his men to the mansion. They gathered in the grand hall, waiting for their orders, expecting plans for war. Instead, Ji-woon stood before them in silence, Eliana's hand in his. "I am done," he said simply. The men shifted uncomfortably. "Boss." "No, I am not your boss anymore." His voice was steady, though his heart raced. "I've spilled enough blood. I've lost too much, and I will not sacrifice her for power." He lifted Eliana's hand for them to see. "This is my kingdom now. Anyone who cannot accept it is free to leave." There was a heavy silence. Then, slowly, one by one, the men bowed their heads, not out of fear, but out of respect. "Then we follow you still," one said. "Not as the Ice King, but as the man you've become." That night, Eliana and Ji-woon knelt together in the chapel once more. Candles flickered around them, casting soft light on their faces. Eliana clasped his hands and whispered, "This is where it all began, where you chose me, and I chose you." Ji-woon's voice was thick with emotion. "I thought love was weakness, but you showed me it's the greatest strength." Tears slid down her cheeks as she leaned her head against his. "We made it, Ji-woon. We chose love." He kissed her softly, reverently, as if sealing a covenant. For the first time in his life, the Ice King's heart was at peace. Outside, the city still whispered of Mafia wars, betrayals, and shadows. Taejin's threats still loomed somewhere in the distance. But inside that chapel, in that sacred moment, Ji-woon and Eliana were untouchable. Together, they had rewritten a story the world thought was impossible, where a ruthless Mafia king laid down his crown for a church girl, and where love became the weapon that conquered all. And so, their redemption began.
Hello besties, in this sweet story we learned that June was feared, ruthless and broken by his mafia life, but through Eliana's pure patient love, a woman who knew nothing about violence, alcohol or crime, he learned peace, forgiveness and the courage to leave the darkness behind. Besties, sometimes the greatest power isn't in guns, money or fear, it's in kindness, patience and love that doesn't give up. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe and share. I hope you've enjoyed the story.